The night her ex-husband got down on one knee at table 7, Nadine was in the back washing dishes. She heard the applause through the kitchen door. She looked through the glass. She saw Terrence, the man who took the house, the savings, 26 years of her labor, her name on nothing, sliding a ring onto a woman half her age. Nadine did not cry. She did not walk out. She wiped her hands on her apron and turned back to the stack of dirty plates. But before that night was over, she would leave something on their table, and what she left would be talked about in that restaurant for years. The kitchen at the Sterling ran at 104 degrees on a Saturday night. Steam came off the dishwashing station in sheets. The exhaust fans above the grill pulled grease and smoke upward, but never fast enough. The air carried everything at once. Seared butter, garlic hitting a hot pan, the sharp edge of vinegar from a reduction on Station 3. Underneath all of it, the chemical smell of industrial soap and water hot enough to leave marks. The Sterling sat on Peachtree Street in Atlanta. Creole Southern fusion, fine dining, 22 years in operation. It had survived 3 recessions, 2 ownership changes, and a kitchen fire in 2014 that shut it down for 4 months. The dining room seated 80. The kitchen held 12 staff on a full Saturday rotation. The dishwasher station sat at the back, closest to the service door, farthest from the pass where plates went out. Nadine stood at that station. She had been standing there since 4 in the afternoon. It was now 9:17. Her hands were red from the water, not sunburned, heat-stained. 4 months of water at 140 degrees will do that. Her apron was white at the start of every shift. By 9 it was streaked with sauce and grease and whatever came back on the plates. Her shoes were slip-resistant black, the soles worn smooth at the heels from standing on tile for 8 hours at a time. She knew the name of every plate in the kitchen. She knew which pans the line cooks needed back first. She knew the turnaround time for a full rack. 8 minutes wash, 3 minutes dry, 45 seconds to sort and stack. She knew these things because she had done them 6 nights a week for 4 months, and because Nadine Colette Baptiste had spent 26 years learning how to keep a system running without anyone noticing she was the one running it. In a professional kitchen, the dishwasher is the lowest position. No one trains for it, no one plans for it, but nothing moves without it. No clean plates means no food goes out. No clean pans means the line stops. The dishwasher is the floor the whole building stands on. Most people in the dining room do not think about the floor. Nadine did not think about the dining room. She thought about the next rack. She thought about the water temperature. She thought about keeping her station clear so the busser had somewhere to put the bins when they came back heavy. She worked the way she had always worked. Quiet, steady, invisible. She had not planned to be here tonight. She had not planned to be here at all. But 4 months ago, planning had stopped being something Nadine Colette Baptiste had the luxury of doing. 4 months earlier, Nadine had been living in a house on Collier Road in northwest Atlanta that she had called home for 22 years. She had married Terrence Darnell Whitfield when she was 32 years old. He was 34, charming, ambitious, a commercial real estate developer who had built his firm from a single office on Marietta Street into one of the most connected boutique operations in Atlanta. He had a handshake people remembered, and a voice that made rooms go quiet when he spoke. Nadine was from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. She had come to Atlanta at 24 with a degree in accounting she never used professionally because Terrence's firm needed someone to manage the books, and he said it made more sense to keep it in the family. She agreed. She was 27 and in love, and it made sense at the time. She managed the books. She raised 2 children. She cooked every client dinner. She organized every open house. She entertained every investor, every partner, every banker who came through that front door on Collier Road expecting a meal and a conversation and leaving with both. Her name was on none of it, not on the firm, not on the accounts, not on the deed to the house they had lived in for 22 years. In 26 years of marriage, Nadine cooked more than 4,000 dinners. She hosted more than 200 client events. She planned birthday parties for the children of people whose names she had memorized from Terrence's contact list. Every contract Terrence closed started with a meal Nadine prepared and a table Nadine set. She was the reason the room felt warm. She was the reason people stayed past dessert. She was the reason they called back. Nobody paid her for any of it. There was no title, no salary, no equity, no acknowledgement in any filing or any annual report. She did not ask for one because that is not how she was raised, and because she believed the marriage itself was the acknowledgement. She believed they were building the same thing. She had brought one thing from Baton Rouge that Terrence never touched: a recipe book, brown leather cover, soft from years of handling, 214 handwritten pages, every one filled with her mother's script. Opal May Baptiste had died when Nadine was 30. She left behind no money, no property, no accounts. She left behind that book, Creole recipes written in pencil and ink over 30 years, gumbo, etouffee, pralines, sauces that had no measurements, only instructions, like a pinch of this and enough of that, and you will know when it smells right. Nadine kept the book in the kitchen drawer next to the stove for 26 years. She opened it almost every day. She cooked from it almost every night. The pages smelled like butter browned, just past golden and basil and lemon. The smell of her mother's kitchen in Baton Rouge on a Sunday afternoon. Terrence walked past that drawer 10,000 times. He never opened the book. He never asked what was inside it. She signed papers over the years. She signed them because she trusted him. She did not read every page. She would later learn what was on those pages. Terrence started planning the divorce 14 months before he served the papers. He did not tell Nadine. He did not tell the children. He told his lawyers. He told his accountant. He told Simone Avery, 32 years old, a junior associate at his firm, who had started 2 years earlier, and who saw in Terrence what Nadine had once seen before she understood what was underneath. His legal team spent 14 months restructuring everything they could restructure. The house on Collier Road had gone through a refinancing 3 years before the papers were served. The new deed carried one name: Terrence Darnell Whitfield. Nadine had signed the closing documents. She remembered the pen in her hand. She remembered the conference room. She did not remember anyone explaining that she was signing the house away. The business accounts were reorganized so that her 26 years of bookkeeping, client hosting, and operational support were invisible in the records. The savings account, $340,000, built over 2 decades, was moved into a trust in Terrence's name. The investment portfolio was locked behind a beneficiary designation that named him and only him. Every piece of it was legal. Every piece of it was deliberate. Every piece of it was done while Nadine was still cooking dinner for his clients and still believing they were building the same life. The joint checking account had $9,400 in it. That was the one thing his team did not move. Not because they chose to leave it, because it was a small enough amount that moving it would have triggered a notification before the papers were ready. By the time Nadine's lawyer got involved, Terrence's team had a 14-month head start. The lawyer looked at the documents for 2 hours. Then she looked at Nadine. She did not say much. She did not need to. The structure was clean. The transfers were legal. The outcome was already decided before Nadine knew there was a decision being made. $9,400, an old car, her clothes, her mother's recipe book. That was what 26 years came to. The papers were served on a Tuesday afternoon. Nadine was in the kitchen cutting onions for a dinner party she had been planning for one of Terrence's investors. She heard the doorbell. She wiped her hands on a towel. She opened the door. The man on the porch handed her an envelope and left. She stood in the doorway and read the first page. She did not read past the first page. She already knew. She went back to the kitchen. She turned the stove off. She put the knife down. She packed one box: clothes, the recipe book, a photograph of her mother she kept in the bedside drawer. She did not pack anything from the living room. She did not pack anything from the office. She put the box in the trunk. She sat in the driver's seat. She did not start the car for 11 minutes. She did not know where she was going. She would figure that out in the morning. Tonight, she drove to a motel on Buford Highway and paid $47 for a room that smelled like bleach and someone else's cigarettes. She set the recipe book on the nightstand. She did not open it. She sat on the edge of the bed for a long time. She had $9,400 in a checking account that would be frozen within the week. She had a car with 143,000 miles on it. She had no job history, no resume, no professional references. 26 years of full-time work that existed in no system, no database, no record. She was 58 years old. She applied to 3 places in the first week: a bookstore in Decatur, an office supply store on Ponce, a catering company in Buckhead. All 3 said they would be in touch. None of them called back. A 58-year-old woman with no employment history and no references does not get callbacks. That is not cruelty. That is how the system works when you have spent 26 years building someone else's system instead of your own. 3 weeks later, she saw a help wanted sign in the window of a restaurant on Peachtree Street. The motel on Buford Highway was not meant for long stays. The walls were thin enough to hear the television next door. The parking lot filled with different cars every night. Nadine kept the room clean because that is what she did. She made the bed each morning, even though housekeeping would have done it. She folded her clothes and set them on the chair by the window. She kept the bathroom counter wiped down. She kept the small things in order, because the large things were no longer hers to keep. Every night she opened the recipe book. Not to cook. There was no kitchen. There was a microwave on a shelf and a mini fridge that hummed too loud. She opened the book because her mother's handwriting was the only familiar thing left. She turned the pages slowly. She read instructions she had memorized decades ago. Roux. Start with equal parts. Low heat. Stir until it smells like pecans. That was how Opal May wrote. Not in measurements, in smells, in sounds. In the moment the color changes and you know. Nadine read those pages the way some people read letters from someone who has died. Not for information, for company. The checking account was frozen on the 8th day. She had withdrawn $6,000 in cash before it locked. She had that and the car and the book and nothing else that could be converted into a life. She walked into the Sterling on a Wednesday morning. The sign in the window said help wanted. Dishwasher. She asked for the manager. She did not have a resume. She told them she could start immediately. She started the next morning. That was 4 months ago. Tonight the kitchen was louder than usual. Saturday nights at the Sterling ran on a system. Every position in the kitchen had a place and a purpose and a rank. The dishwasher sat at the bottom. Above the dishwasher was the prep cook. Above the prep cook was the line cook. Above the line cook was the sous chef. Above the sous chef was the head chef. That was the order. That was how it had been since the French named it the brigade system 200 years ago, and it had not changed much since. Nadine learned the system by watching it. She watched the prep cooks arrive at 2 in the afternoon and begin cutting vegetables in silence. She watched the line cooks take their stations at 4 and check their mise en place. She watched the sous chef walk the line before service and inspect every station without saying much. She watched the head chef stand at the pass and call orders and plate food and send it out and never once raise his voice. She learned the rhythm. She learned the language. 86 meant something was gone. Behind meant someone was walking past you. Corner meant someone was coming around a blind spot. Herd meant you understood the order. She filed every one of these into her memory, the way she had once filed client names and dinner preferences for Terrence's business. She started writing things down. In the back pages of her mother's recipe book, past the last written page in the blank space Opal May had never filled, Nadine began keeping notes. How the kitchen moved, what each station needed and when. How the timing worked between appetizers and mains. How a full dining room could be fed in 90 minutes if every person did their part. Nobody asked her to write any of this down. She did it because she had spent 26 years managing a system that nobody acknowledged, and she recognized another system when she saw one. Wanda Fay Pritchett, 45 years old, line cook 8 years, At the Sterling was the first person who spoke to Nadine outside of work. It happened in the alley behind the kitchen during a break on Nadine's third week. Wanda smoked 1 cigarette per shift. She offered Nadine the space next to her. They stood in the alley without talking for 2 minutes. Then Wanda said she had been at the Sterling longer than anyone except the chef, and that the last 3 dishwashers had quit within a month. Nadine said she was not planning to quit. Wanda looked at her. She did not ask why. She finished her cigarette and went back inside. Over the next 2 months, Wanda became the person Nadine talked to. Not about everything, not about the divorce, or the house, or the money, but about the small things, the shift, the menu, the customers who sent plates back, the customers who cleaned their plates and said nothing, which Wanda said was always better than a compliment. Nadine told Wanda about Terrence after 2 months. She told her on a Tuesday night while they were breaking down the kitchen after close. She did not tell the whole story. She told enough. Wanda listened without interrupting. When Nadine finished, Wanda said one thing. She said she was sorry that happened. Then she picked up a bus tub and carried it to the dish station, and that was the end of the conversation. Some weeks, Nadine cooked the staff meal. Every restaurant has one. The meal the kitchen eats together before service starts. It is usually made from whatever needs to be used before it turns. Leftovers, trimmings, the parts of the animal the menu does not want. Nadine made those ingredients into something else. She did not follow the Sterling's recipes. She followed her mother's. She made rice and gravy from scraps. She made a roux from butter and flour and turned it into something that smelled like Baton Rouge on a Sunday. She made cornbread from a recipe that had no measurements, only instincts her hands remembered. Nobody knew where the recipes came from. They just knew the dishwasher's staff meal tasted different. The line cooks ate it without saying much. Wanda ate it and looked at Nadine across the prep table, but did not say anything either. The head chef noticed. He did not say so. He watched her work for 6 weeks before he said a word to her that was not about plates. Clarence Odell Tate was 63 years old. He had been the head chef at the Sterling for 19 years. Born in Savannah, Georgia, raised by a grandmother who cooked for a church congregation of 300 every Sunday and never wrote a recipe down in her life. Clarence started washing dishes at a restaurant in downtown Savannah when he was 17 because he needed money and because the kitchen was the only place that would hire a boy who had dropped out of school. He learned to cook the way Nadine's mother had learned to cook, by standing next to someone who knew how, by watching hands, by listening for the sound of oil at the right temperature, by smelling when garlic had gone 1 second too far. He worked his way from dishwasher to prep cook in 2 years, from prep cook to line cook in 3, from line cook to sous chef in 4, from sous chef to head chef at a restaurant in Midtown Atlanta by the time he was 39. He had trained 11 cooks in his career. He had fired more than that. He did not waste time on people who treated the kitchen like a job. He spent time on people who treated it like a language they already knew, but had not yet learned to speak. He watched Nadine cut onions for the staff meal one afternoon. She did it without looking at the blade. She did it with a rhythm that came from repetition so deep it had become automatic. She held the knife the way someone holds a tool they were given by a person, not a classroom. He walked over to her station after the meal. He stood next to her for a moment without speaking. Then he said one sentence. "That is not how someone who learned from a recipe cuts an onion. That is how someone who learned from a person cuts an onion." Nadine looked at him. She did not respond. He did not wait for a response. The next evening after service, Clarence told Nadine to stay. He handed her an apron, not the dishwasher's apron, a prep apron. He pointed to a station and told her to dice carrots. She diced them. He looked at the cuts. He said one word, again. She diced them again. He looked, better. That became the pattern. After her dishwashing shift ended, Nadine stayed. Clarence taught her station work. He taught her sauces. He taught her how to plate. He taught her heat control and timing and the difference between a dish that was cooked and a dish that was finished. He never once said she was good at it. He said again and better and not yet. Those were his only feedback. He told her once that every great chef he had ever known started at the bottom. He told her that the dishwasher sees the whole kitchen because nobody watches the dishwasher. He told her that was an advantage most people wasted. Nadine did not waste it. 6 weeks after Clarence began teaching her, Nadine cooked a full dish in the Sterling's kitchen for the first time. She opened her mother's recipe book to a page near the middle. She had not cooked this dish since before the divorce. She followed the instructions Opal May had written in pencil 30 years ago, butter browned just past golden, fresh basil torn by hand, a squeeze of lemon at the end. The smell filled the kitchen in under a minute. It moved through the air like something that had been waiting to be released. Wanda stopped what she was doing. She stood at her station with a towel in her hand and looked toward Nadine's station. Clarence stood at the pass. He did not say a word. He watched Nadine plate the dish. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he nodded once. Nadine had been invisible for 26 years in a house where she built everything. She had been visible for 6 weeks in a kitchen where she had nothing. She did not know yet how much that visibility was about to cost her and how much it was about to return. The kitchen was running full speed on a Saturday night in October when Nadine heard the laugh. She was at the dish station. Her hands were in the water. The steam was rising. The kitchen noise was loud enough to cover most sounds from the dining room. But not that sound. Not that specific laugh. She knew it the way you know. A sound that has been in your house for 26 years. It was not loud. It was not forced. It was the laugh Terrence used when he wanted a room to feel comfortable. The one he saved for clients, for investors, for people he wanted something from. She had heard it across dinner tables and living rooms and conference calls for more than 2 decades. She lifted her hands out of the water. She dried them slowly on her apron. She did not turn around immediately. She stood still for a few seconds. Then she walked to the kitchen door. The door had a small window, a porthole made of glass, no bigger than a dinner plate. She looked through it. Table 7, the corner table, the one with the best view of the room. Terrence Darnell Whitfield sat facing the window. He wore a dark suit. His watch caught the candlelight. Across from him sat Simone Avery. Red dress, her hair pulled back. The table had flowers. It had candles that were not part of the restaurant's standard setup. A bottle of wine was already open. 2 glasses poured. This was not a regular dinner. The table told a story before anyone at it said a word. Nadine looked through that glass for 7 seconds. Then she turned around. She walked back to the sink. She picked up a plate. She washed it. She did not know yet that he was about to get on one knee. She did not know yet that she would be washing the dishes from his table before the night was over. The proposal came at 9:42. Nadine was not looking through the window when it happened. She heard it. The dining room went quiet first. That particular quiet that falls over a room when something is happening at one table that everyone else has stopped to watch. Then a voice. Terrence's voice. Too low to make out the words through the kitchen door, but the tone was unmistakable. The careful tone. The rehearsed tenderness. Then the sound that followed. A gasp from the table. A pause that lasted long enough for a ring to go on a finger. Then applause. The whole dining room. 50-60 people clapping for 2 strangers at a corner table who had just agreed to spend their lives together. The sound of applause moved through the kitchen door and filled the space where Nadine was standing with her hands in a sink full of hot water and dirty plates. The line cooks kept working. The sous chef kept calling orders. But Wanda stopped. She looked at Nadine across the kitchen. She knew who was at table 7. Nadine had mentioned his name once 2 months ago, and Wanda had not forgotten it. Wanda walked to the dish station. She stood beside Nadine. The applause was still going in the dining room. Champagne glasses were clinking. Someone was laughing. Wanda leaned in close enough to speak under the noise. "Do you want to go home?" Nadine did not look up from the sink. "I have 3 more hours on my shift." Wanda stood there for another moment. Then she went back to her station. You might expect her to walk out. You might expect a scene. Nadine Colette Baptiste did neither. She washed the next plate. She loaded the next rack. She kept the station clean and the turnaround fast, and she did not look through the window in the kitchen door again. But she had already decided something. She had decided it the moment she heard his laugh through the kitchen door. She just had not told anyone yet. Nadine walked to the back of the kitchen, past the prep stations, past the dry storage shelves. She pushed open the heavy door of the walk-in cooler and stepped inside. She pulled the door shut behind her. The temperature dropped 40 degrees in one step. The air was still. The hum of the compressor was the only sound. Shelves of produce and dairy and sealed containers lined both walls. The light was a single fluorescent tube. White, flat, no warmth in it. She stood between the shelves and did not move. The kitchen noise was gone. The dining room applause was gone. The sound of Terrence's laugh was gone. In here, there was only the cold and the hum and the space to stand still without anyone needing anything from her. She thought about the last meal she cooked in the house on Collier Road. 2 weeks before the papers came, a Tuesday night, she made shrimp etouffee from her mother's recipe. She had made it 100 times before. She made it that night the way she always made it, slowly, with care. With the roux stirred until it smelled like pecans and the shrimp added at the last moment so they did not overcook. Terrence ate the whole plate. He did not say anything about it. He had not said anything about her cooking in years. He ate it and put the plate in the sink and went to his office and closed the door. She washed the plate. She dried it. She put it away. That was the last meal she made for him. She stood in the walk-in cooler for 3 minutes. She was not making a plan. She was not weighing options. She was arriving at something that had already been decided the moment she heard the laugh through the kitchen door. She was just catching up to it. She was going to cook one more thing. Not for revenge. Not to make a scene. She was going to make a dish. One dish. The last one. To close 26 years on her own terms. Not his. Not the lawyer's. Not the court. Hers. She pushed the cooler door open. The heat of the kitchen hit her face. She walked through the line. She found Clarence at the pass. She asked him one question. He looked at her for a long time before he answered. Clarence did not ask why. He did not ask what had happened in the dining room. He looked at Nadine, and he saw something in her face that he understood without explanation. He had spent 19 years reading kitchens. He could read people the same way. He stepped to the side of the pass. He pointed to the open station at the end of the line. He said one word, "Go." Nadine walked to the station. She opened her locker and took out the recipe book. The brown leather cover was soft in her hands. She set it on the counter and opened it to a page near the back. She did not need to look for it. She knew exactly where it was. Page 147. Her mother's handwriting in pencil. The letters were small and careful. The page had a grease stain in the upper right corner that had been there for 30 years. Opal Maize Butter Pecan Praline. This was the recipe her mother made for every occasion that mattered. Birthdays, homecomings, graduations. The night before Nadine left Baton Rouge for Atlanta, and 26 years ago, the dessert Nadine had made for her own wedding reception. 64 guests, every plate cleaned. Terrence had told her that night it was the best thing he had ever tasted. He had not said it again in 26 years, but he had eaten it every time she made it. Nadine pulled butter from the cooler, brown sugar from dry storage, pecans from the prep shelf, heavy cream, vanilla, a pinch of sea salt. She laid everything out on the station in the order the recipe required. She did not measure. She did not need to. Her hands knew the amounts the way they knew the weight of a plate and the temperature of water. She put butter in a heavy pan over medium heat. The butter melted. It foamed. It began to brown. The smell rose off the pan and moved through the kitchen. Butter going past golden into something deeper, something amber. The smell her mother's kitchen carried every Sunday in Baton Rouge. She added brown sugar. The mixture bubbled. She stirred with a wooden spoon in slow circles. The sugar dissolved into the butter, and the color shifted. Light brown to dark amber to the edge of copper. This was the moment that separated a praline made from a recipe and a praline made from memory. You could not set a timer for it. You had to watch the color and smell the change and pull the pan at the exact second before the sugar crossed from caramel into burn. Nadine pulled the pan. She added cream. The mixture hissed and climbed the sides. She stirred it down. She added pecans she had toasted dry in a separate pan. She added vanilla. She added salt. She squeezed half a lemon over the top. The smell shifted one final time. Butter browned just past golden. The sweetness of pecan and sugar. And underneath the sharp, clean edge of lemon cutting through everything. The smell moved through the kitchen. Wanda stopped plating. She stood at her station and watched. 2 line cooks looked over. Clarence stood at the pass with his arms folded. Nobody said a word. Nadine spooned the praline onto a white plate. She shaped it with the back of the spoon the way her mother had taught her. She let it cool for 90 seconds. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a small piece of paper. She wrote something on it. She folded it once. She placed it beside the praline on the plate. She did not show anyone what she wrote. She set the plate on the pass and looked at Wanda. Wanda looked at the plate. She looked at Nadine. She picked it up without a word and carried it through the kitchen door into the dining room. Table 7, the corner table. The main course plates had already been cleared. The champagne bottle was half empty. Simone was looking at the ring on her finger. Terence was leaning back in his chair, with the look of a man who believed everything was going exactly as he planned. Wanda set the plate down between them. She set the folded note beside it. She did not say who it was from. She said the kitchen had sent a complimentary dessert to congratulate the couple on their engagement. She smiled. She walked away. Simone picked up her spoon first. She tasted the praline and closed her eyes. She said it was incredible. She asked Terence if he had tried it. Terence picked up his spoon. He tasted it. He stopped. He held the spoon in his hand and did not bring it back to the plate. The flavor moved through him, the way a song moves through a room when you have not heard it in years, but your body remembers every note. He had tasted this before. He knew he had tasted this before. He could not place where. Then he could. He put the spoon down. He picked up the folded note. He opened it. He read it. This was the dessert from our wedding reception. I made it then. I made it tonight. It was always mine. Congratulations on your new beginning, Nadine. He read it again. He read it a third time. He put the note face down on the table. He did not touch the praline again. Simone asked him what the note said. He did not answer. She asked again. He said it was nothing. She looked at his face and knew it was not nothing. She did not ask a third time. $9,400 was everything Nadine had when she walked out of 26 years. This plate cost her nothing to make. The ingredients came from the restaurant's pantry. The recipe came from a book that fit in a locker. The skill came from a lifetime of learning at her mother's side, and 4 months of standing in a kitchen where nobody owed her anything and she earned everything she got. The plate was worth more than everything Terence took. He just did not know how to put it on a balance sheet. Terence called the waiter over. His voice was flat. He asked to speak with the manager. The manager came to the table. Terence asked one question. Who made the dessert? The manager did not know. He went to the kitchen. He asked Clarence. Clarence stood at the pass. He wiped his hands on a towel. He looked at the manager. The dishwasher. The manager brought the answer back to the table. Terence sat with it. He did not ask a follow-up question. He did not ask for a name. He did not need to. He knew who washed dishes at the Sterling now. He knew because a praline made from a recipe that had been in one family for 2 generations does not end up on a plate by accident in a restaurant where your ex-wife works. Simone watched him. She did not understand what was happening. She understood that something had changed at the table in the last 2 minutes, and that the man sitting across from her who had been smiling all evening was no longer smiling. She put her hand on his arm. He did not respond. The rest of the dining room continued as normal. Table 3 was finishing their appetizers. Table 12 had just ordered a second bottle of wine. A couple near the window was laughing about something. The busser cleared plates from table 9. The hostess seated a party of 4 near the bar. Nobody in that room knew that the dishwasher in the back kitchen had just placed 26 years of marriage on a plate and sent it to table 7 with a note that said everything and nothing at the same time. Nadine was back at her station. Her hands were in the water. The rack was running. The plates were stacking. Wanda stood at the station next to her. Neither of them spoke. They worked side by side in the noise of the kitchen, and the silence between them said more than a conversation would have. Terrence asked for the check at 10:14. The bill was $412. He paid it in cash. He left a 30% tip. He stood up. Simone stood up beside him. He put his hand on her back and guided her toward the door. He did not look toward the kitchen. He did not look through the glass window in the kitchen door. He walked out of the Sterling and into the night, and he did not say a word to anyone on the way out. Nadine did not watch him leave. She heard the front door close. She heard the dining room fill the space where his table had been with the sound of other people's conversations. She washed another plate. She loaded another rack. Terrence did not sleep that night. He sat in the living room of the house on Collier Road that no longer had Nadine's name on the deed, and he held the folded note in his hand, and he read it 4 more times before he put it in his jacket pocket. He did not know it yet, but the note on that table was the beginning of something he could not stop. Terrence Darnell Whitfield did not go to work the Monday after the proposal. He sat in the kitchen of the house on Collier Road at 6 in the morning with a cup of coffee he did not drink. The house was quiet. Simone had gone back to her apartment the night before. He was alone in the house that used to have Nadine in it every morning before he woke up. He thought about the praline. He thought about the taste. He thought about how he knew it and could not name it, and then could. He thought about the wedding reception. 64 guests, every plate cleaned. He remembered telling her it was the best thing he had ever tasted. He did not remember saying it again after that night. He sat there, and for the first time in 26 years, he did something he had never done. He traced backward through the dinners. Not all of them. That would have taken days. But the ones that mattered. The ones that closed deals. The Hargrove account. $2 million commercial lease. September 2009. Nadine made crawfish bisque and pecan-crusted catfish for 8 people at the dining room table. The Hargroves signed the following week. Arthur Hargrove told Terrence at the closing that his wife had not stopped talking about the food. The Jennings Development. Mixed-use property in Buckhead. $4.3 million. Nadine hosted the dinner at the house. She made her mother's gumbo. She made cornbread from scratch. She remembered the names of every person at the table, including the lender's wife who had mentioned 3 months earlier that she was allergic to shellfish. Nadine made her a separate plate. The lender approved the financing 2 days later. The Beaumont deal. The Morrison closing. The Decatur project. Every deal he could remember started the same way. A dinner Nadine cooked. A room Nadine set. A conversation Nadine kept moving. His name was on every contract. Hers was on none of them. He had never connected those 2 things before. He had never needed to. The dinners happened. The deals closed. He took the credit the way you take air. Without noticing. Without gratitude. Without understanding that it could stop. It had stopped. He had eaten at restaurants every night since the divorce. He had hosted 2 client dinners at a private dining room downtown. Both had gone well enough. Neither had gone the way the dinners on Collier Road used to go. Nobody stayed past dessert. Nobody called the following week to say their spouse had not stopped talking about the food. The deals closed anyway because Terrence was good at what he did. But something was missing from the room, and he had not been able to name it until he tasted a praline at table 7 on a Saturday night. Simone noticed the change. She did not know what had caused it. Terrence was quieter in the weeks after the proposal. Less certain. He canceled a client dinner without explanation. He sat in the kitchen some mornings before work and stared at nothing. She asked him once who Nadine was. She had heard the name from the restaurant manager. Terrence looked at her. He did not answer. She did not ask again. He did not call Nadine. He did not go to the Sterling. He sat with what he now understood, and he did not know what to do with it. That is what happens when you see the value of something only after you have made sure it was taken away. The recognition comes too late. It always comes too late. Janelle Whitfield Monroe, 29 years old, married, living in Charlotte, North Carolina, called her mother for the first time in 4 months on a Wednesday evening. Terrence had told her what happened at the restaurant. He had not told her everything. He told her Nadine was working at the Sterling. He told her Nadine had sent something to his table. He did not tell her what the note said. Janelle had grown up in the house on Collier Road. She had eaten her mother's cooking every night for 18 years before she left for college. She had watched her mother host dinner parties and manage the household and keep everything running smoothly. She had also grown up hearing her father talk about the business, his deals, his clients, his vision. The narrative of the Whitfield household was clear. Terrence built the life. Nadine maintained the home. Those were the roles. Those were the words the family used. Built and maintained. One was active, one was passive. Janelle had never questioned which was which. When Terrence told her Nadine was washing dishes at a restaurant on Peachtree Street, Janelle felt something she did not expect. She felt embarrassed. Not for her mother, for herself. Her mother was a dishwasher at a fine dining restaurant in Atlanta, and Janelle's first thought was what that looked like. Not what it meant, not what it cost, what it looked like. She called Nadine that Wednesday. The phone rang 4 times. Nadine picked up. Neither of them said anything for a few seconds. Then Janelle asked the question that had been in her throat since her father told her, "Mom, why are you washing dishes?" The question was not concern. It was not worry. It was the voice of a daughter who had been told her whole life that her father was the engine and her mother was the scenery. Nadine answered without hesitation, "Because someone has to, and because I am starting over." Janelle did not know how to respond to that. She said she would call again soon. She did not call again for 3 weeks. But something had shifted. In those 3 weeks, Janelle did something she had never done before. She started asking questions. Not to her mother, to her father. She asked about the house. She asked about the accounts. She asked why her mother's name was not on the deed. She asked why her mother had no retirement savings after 26 years of marriage. Terrence told her the lawyers had handled everything. He told her the arrangement was standard. He told her Nadine had agreed to everything. Janelle asked to see the divorce settlement. Terrence said that was between him and his lawyers. Janelle hung up. She called a friend from college who worked at a family law firm in Raleigh. She described the situation without using names. Her friend listened. Then her friend said something Janelle had not expected. She said the pattern Janelle was describing had a name. She said it was not uncommon. She said it was the kind of thing that looked legal on paper and looked like something else entirely when you understood what had actually happened. Janelle did not call her mother back for 3 weeks. When she did, her voice was different. 6 months after the night at the Sterling, Nadine was no longer washing dishes. She had moved to prep cook 8 weeks after the proposal night. Clarence had put her name forward. The sous chef had tested her on station work and passed her. 2 months after that, she moved to the line. She ran the sauce station. She ran it clean and fast and without mistakes. The kitchen staff had stopped calling her the dishwasher. They called her by her name. In a professional kitchen, moving from dishwasher to line cook in 6 months is not common. It is not unheard of either. It happens when someone arrives with skills they learned somewhere else, and the kitchen is smart enough to recognize it. Nadine had 26 years of cooking behind her. She had a recipe book with 214 pages of technique. She had hands that knew heat and timing and flavor the way a musician knows a scale. What she did not have was professional language and professional structure. Clarence gave her that. The rest she already carried. Pearl Aniston was 70 years old. She had owned the Sterling for 22 of those years. She was the first black woman to own a fine dining restaurant on Peachtree Street. She had opened it in 2004 with money she borrowed from 3 different banks after the first 11 said no. She had survived everything the restaurant business could throw at a person, and she had done it without selling the place or changing the name or lowering the standard. Pearl had not spoken to Nadine directly until the 6th month. She knew who Nadine was. Clarence had told her the story. Not the whole story. Enough. Pearl had watched from a distance the way she watched everything in her restaurant, quietly, with attention. Without rushing to a conclusion, she asked Nadine to come to her office on a Tuesday afternoon before service. The office was small. A desk, 2 chairs, a framed photograph on the wall of Pearl standing in front of the Sterling on opening night in 2004. Nadine sat across from her. "Clarence says you have a book. He says the book is better than anything he can teach you." Nadine did not respond immediately. She looked at Pearl. Pearl looked back. 2 women who had both learned a long time ago that words cost something and should not be spent carelessly. Pearl told her what she had in mind. Not a promotion. Something else. Pearl had been looking at a space on Auburn Avenue for 2 years. A smaller building. Room for 40 seats. She wanted to open a second restaurant. Casual Creole. The food Pearl grew up eating in her grandmother's kitchen in Mobile, Alabama, but could never put on the Sterling's menu because the Sterling was fine dining, and fine dining had rules. She wanted Nadine to run the kitchen. Nadine sat with that for a moment. Then she reached into the bag she had brought with her and took out the recipe book. She set it on the desk between them. Pearl opened it. She turned the pages slowly. She read the handwriting. She looked at the grease stains and the pencil marks and the notes in the margins where Opal May had corrected herself or added a variation. She did not say anything for a long time. "Your mother wrote this." "Yes, ma'am." She knew what she was doing. "Yes." She did. Pearl closed the book and placed her hands flat on either side of it. She looked at Nadine. "I want this food in my restaurant, and I want your name on the door." Simone Avery found the note in his jacket pocket 3 weeks after the proposal. She was not looking for it. She was taking the jacket to the dry cleaner. She unfolded it. She read it. She read it again. She did not ask Terence about it immediately. She waited 2 days. She watched him. She watched the way he sat in the kitchen in the mornings, staring at nothing. She watched the way he had stopped hosting clients at the house. She watched the way the man who had always been certain about everything had become uncertain about something he would not name. On the 3rd day, she asked him directly. She asked about the divorce. She asked about the house. She asked about the accounts. She asked how Nadine had ended up with nothing after 26 years. Terence told her the lawyers handled it. He told her the arrangement was fair. Simone listened to every word. Then she asked the one question Terence could not answer. "If you did that to her, what would you do to me?" He did not answer. She put the note on the kitchen counter between them and walked out of the room. She moved out of the apartment they had started sharing. She did not break off the engagement immediately. She simply stopped being present. She stopped answering calls on the first ring. She stopped staying overnight. The ring stayed on her finger for 6 more weeks before she left it on the counter next to a glass of water and a key. Damon Terence Whitfield, 27 years old, had been working in his father's firm since college. He had watched the divorce happen from the inside. He had said nothing. He had taken his father's side, the way a son takes a side when the alternative is losing his position. But after the night at the Sterling, after Janelle started asking questions and sharing what she found, Damon stopped coming to the office. He did not confront his father. He did not make a statement. He applied to a firm in San Francisco. He was hired in November. He moved in December. He called his father once from the airport to say he was leaving. The call lasted 4 minutes. Terence did not lose his business. He did not lose his license. He did not face an investigation, or a courtroom, or a public scandal. What he lost was quieter than that, and in many ways worse. He lost the people. Simone left. Damon left. Janelle stopped calling. The clients still came to the office, but they did not come to the house. Nobody came to the house. The house on Collier Road sat on a half-acre lot with 4 bedrooms and a kitchen that had been built for entertaining and no one to entertain. He kept the house. He kept the accounts. He kept every asset his lawyers had secured. He ate dinner alone every night in a house that smelled like nothing. He ordered takeout most nights. He ate it at the kitchen table, where Nadine had once served crawfish bisque for 8 and cornbread from a recipe with no measurements. The table seated 10. He used one chair. The other 9 stayed empty. He had built exactly what he earned. Not what he deserved. What he earned. There is a difference, and most people do not learn it until the house is quiet and the table is set for one. 10 months after the divorce, Nadine stood in the kitchen of a restaurant on Auburn Avenue and turned the stove on for the first time. The restaurant was called Opal's. The sign above the door was hand-painted. Black letters on a cream background. Simple. Clean. The building was small. 40 seats in the dining room. An open kitchen visible from the counter. A menu written on a chalkboard that Nadine had lettered herself the night before. Casual Creole. The food her mother cooked in Baton Rouge. The food Nadine had been cooking her whole life for people who never knew where it came from. Pearl Aniston had put up the money. Nadine had put up the recipes and the labor and the 6 months of training that turned a dishwasher into a line cook into the head chef of her own kitchen. The arrangement was equal partnership. Both names on the lease, both names on the license. Nadine had made sure of that. She had read every page of every document before she signed. She would never sign anything she did not understand again. The recipe book sat in a glass frame on the wall next to the kitchen door. Brown leather cover, oil stains on the pages visible through the glass, Opal May Baptiste's handwriting in pencil and ink. 214 pages of food that had been passed from one pair of hands to another across 30 years and 2 cities, and 1 storage locker at a motel on Buford Highway where Nadine had kept it safe during the worst 3 weeks of her life. The book was no longer in her hands. It was on the wall for everyone to see. That was the point. Wanda Fay Pritchett stood at the host station. She had left the Sterling 2 weeks before opening. Nadine had asked her to run the front of house. Wanda had said yes before Nadine finished the sentence. She had new business cards with her name on them. She had health insurance for the first time in 3 years. She had a title. Clarence Odell Tate arrived at 7. He sat at a table near the kitchen. He did not order from the menu. He told the server to bring him whatever Nadine wanted to send. He sat with his hands folded and waited. When the plate arrived, he looked at it for a long time before he picked up his fork. He ate slowly. He nodded once. He did not need to say anything else. The dining room filled. Every table taken by 8:30, people from the neighborhood. People who had walked past the building during the weeks of renovation and watched the sign go up and smelled something through the open kitchen window during the soft opening that made them stop on the sidewalk and look inside. The smell of butter browned just past golden and basil and lemon moving through every room and out the front door into the street. Janelle arrived at 8:45. She had flown from Charlotte that afternoon. She had not told her mother she was coming. She stood in the doorway of the restaurant and looked through the room toward the kitchen. She saw Nadine behind the counter, apron tied, hair pulled back, hands moving, plating food, calling orders, running a kitchen the way she had always run everything, with precision, with care, without asking for recognition. Janelle had seen her mother in a kitchen 10,000 times. She had never seen her like this. She had never seen her mother in a room where what she did was the reason the room existed. She walked through the dining room to the kitchen door. Nadine looked up. She saw her daughter. Neither of them said anything. Janelle stepped into the kitchen and stood beside her mother and looked out at the full room. They stood together in the doorway, a mother and a daughter. A room full of people eating food from a book that had survived everything because the woman who wrote it knew what mattered, and the woman who carried it had finally found a place to open it. $9,400 and a recipe book. That was what Terrence thought he left her with. He thought he left her with nothing. He left her with a mother's handwriting and 26 years of knowing how to feed people who mattered. Terrence took the house. He took the savings. He took 26 years of her labor and structured it so her name was on none of it. He kept every asset. He kept every account. He kept the deed and the title and every document his lawyers had prepared. And he still missed the thing that mattered. Some people spend their whole lives taking. They acquire the house, the accounts, the documents. They believe that what can be written on paper is what counts. but they cannot acquire what someone carries inside them: the way they cook, the way they love, the recipes their mother wrote by hand in a kitchen that smelled like butter and basil, and something warm underneath that you could never quite name but would recognize anywhere. The things that cannot be put on paper are often the things that matter most. And by the time you realize it, the kitchen is empty and the table is set for one. If this story reminded you that what you carry inside you is worth more than what anyone can take from you, send it to someone who needs to hear that right now. Here is the question. If someone took 26 years of your work, your house, your money, your name on nothing, and then sat in front of you at a restaurant celebrating a new life while you washed their dishes, would you make them one last plate? Or would you let them eat something they did not deserve? Leave your answer below, because this one is going to divide the room. One more thing before you go. This story is fictional, but the patterns inside it are not. Financial abuse in marriages is real. It is documented. It is more common than most people think. The invisible labor of women who run households and raise children and build their partners' careers without recognition is real. It has economic value that rarely appears on any balance sheet. If any part of this story felt familiar to you, know that there are resources available and that starting over at any age is not a failure. It is a decision. Protect your name on every document you sign. Know what you are signing. That is not distrust. That is self-respect. Subscribe. See you in the next one.